And the reason you're here at Skyline and have this amazing ministry, bro, is because of your humility, not because of your gifts.
I appreciate that. And, that's our number one core behavior we have on our staff.
Yeah.
It's on our walls, number one, humility.
Yeah.
You have to have a humble attitude. If you're going to work at Skyline Church, I don't care how talented or gifted, I've been burned by all of that in 26 years of ministry now, and it's always about the heart. It's right. You have the right heart. It's not about the hype.
That's right.
And I got to see that modeled for 7 years, and I think even through some of those times where it was like, wow, I wanted to hear you teach, and I'm sure the congregation had that, and that would have been pressure for you to say, no, this is the model we're going with. We're doing this because Tom's not preaching this week, and that's something that. How did you deal with that? Because I remember, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you didn't do every Christmas Eve. After a while, like you would leave. Because of family. You would do family trip, and you're not doing the Christmas Eve. So one of the biggest service weekends, or whatever the date fell
Still
on.
is.
Yeah, it's still the biggest. And you look at that and you go, I'm not doing it. Our team is doing it.
My favorite service is Christmas Eve. Yeah. That was the hardest to let go.
Oh.
Yeah, but I didn't. When we started handing it off, there were a lot of conversations, off camera from people in the congregation. Would say, man, Tom must have an amazing guest speaking schedule. He can't preach. And then they'd see me show up and sit in the front row, listening to the guy talking, taking notes, and it's important. And I would just say this, if there's another pastor that this might encourage, it's important at times to see us in leadership walking off the stage, taking a seat and taking notes. Yeah. The people watching that, do it because they're watching.
Yeah.
But when they see that speaks volumes, number one, to the confidence you have in the people that you're platforming, but also to your own heart.
And sometimes we just want to go to church with our family, right? And sit in a service with my wife and take notes sometimes.
Cheryl would say, going to church, I get to sit with you today?
Yeah.
Which was kind of rare.
Which it's
for a long time.
I think it's something, because you mentioned that, it's such an important thing, I think, for people to understand. Like, when you work for the church, you work at the church, it's your job, and then you got to preach on Sunday. Your family's out there somewhere, and they're
selling tapes,
or and you go, golly. And so it's a treat. We don't have that. That's why, I'm so passionate when I talk to people about bringing their family to church. It's like, it's a privilege. Yeah, and really as we come out of COVID, we recognize that too. Like, it's a privilege to have this opportunity to bring my family to church. And for those of us who are preachers every Sunday, it's rare to sit in the service and, that word get fed, right, is like you sit there and you just take it in. It's like, man, I love our church. You get to see it from a different perspective, and you just kind of, if I wasn't leading this church, I'd still come to this church. Like, I love our church, and I felt the same way about High Desert Church. And so when I look at that, and I look at the team ministry, and I look at everything that you've been doing and you've done, you're 40 years into it now at High Desert Church in a new role, but still 40 years. That is such a testament, longevity in ministry. And I did my doctoral dissertation on pastoral burnout because I saw so many friends and so many colleagues just, flaming out. There's disappointments along the way. I can imagine in 40 years of ministry that there's some pain that came along with that. And
Sure.
And just for church people, for anyone tuning in, for pastors, can you share some of your biggest disappointments in those years?
Can I preface it with couple of general comments?
Yeah.
Much of the disappointments that we experience in leadership are self-induced. Many of our disappointments are not. But my point is that my goal has always been to reduce self-induced disappointment by having realistic expectations for people, as well as for myself.
People of the church, staff, both.
For myself,
Oh, your
Yeah,
own.
for my own self. I feel, Jeremy, like, for example, you just know people are going to leave your team. People you hear about. You and Jamie left our team. That was a very hard thing, and I hope it was hard for you.
Yeah, it was tremendously difficult.
It was hard for us because, initially when you came, Jack and I had conversations about Jeremy's future at HTC, that the Lord had other plans for, so there's no bitterness here. But we have to temper our enthusiasm for people. We will all be disappointments to ourselves, to others, and others will disappoint us. When I say the greatest disappointments in ministry are when wonderful people leave HTC's team, and we miss them. We can backfill. I mean, we got people to do what you did, but we lost the regular interaction that we enjoyed so much. It wasn't what you did for the church.
Yeah.
It's just hanging out. It's just the encouragement that we had with you as a regular part of our schedule, and that's true for a number of people over the years. So that's the greatest disappointment when they leave. But I would say you have to go in knowing they're probably not going to retire here.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just not realistic. So I've created in my mind, these ideas that I think are biblical, but they're more metaphorical for me to help visualize that the body of Christ, the church, capital C church, is a multi-site church. Jesus, the senior pastor. And all of us are just part of his team. And he just kind of puts us where he wants us.
Yeah.
So when Jeremy leaves Victorville and comes to San Diego, he's not leaving anything. The senior pastor with a capital S has taken you and given you a different assignment. And he has, for whatever reason, kept me in my assignment at HTC as the lead pastor for 38 years. That's his purview. And if he has Jeremy there for 7 and then moves him to San Diego, that's his call. It's like the book I wrote, it's not my church.
Yeah, that's, when you think about, in church success, you had this growth, you had all these things going on. The staff core, at least, I don't know if you can call it that, but stayed together for quite a run there. I remember when I came on, that was what was going on. 10,
we
15.
were old when you got there.
Yeah. You had 10, 15-year runs of guys at that point, which some of them are still there.
Yeah.
There was an incredible continuity, which, when you talk about expectation, I think it's really good to temper those expectations. Like I said, people are going to leave, right? They're going to leave. You certainly want them to stay together. When I planted the church down here, it was all about, I want a group of people and we stay together forever.
Right.
It's just unrealistic. So whenever someone would leave, it was so disappointing. And you had to really temper those expectations. So over the years, your High Desert Church is growing. It's all this stuff. And you could have gone other places at some point, I would imagine. I can think of one particular place near the water that it would have been an opportunity for you to leave High Desert Church and leave Victorville to go to, at least on the surface, would be considered better place, better church.
It was the wealthiest community in America.
Yeah. So you have an opportunity, all right? Yeah. Think about that just for a moment. How did you discern? No, I'm not going to do that. When from the outside, people would look at that and go, "That's crazy." Like, no way. You said no to that. And talk about that a little bit.
The mission is bigger than any guy. The church is bigger than any pastor. And when I say the church, capital C church, and again, I have a very high view of pastoral authority, of pastoral leadership. I'm in awe of the gifting of so many pastors around the world. God doesn't need any of us. So when he gives us a place at the table, like he gave us at Victorville, and then different opportunities begin popping up. And you know this is true. When your church starts to grow, people notice and they start calling because they would like to see what is happening there happen in their community or with their church. And I get that. But there's a bigger show here than a particular local church or two. And so when the master pastor, write that down, I want to remember that. When Jesus, the chief shepherd of the flock decides that people will go to different places, that's totally fine. The biggest problem, I think, in that whole conversation is when senior pastors get mad because Jesus has decided to move a player somewhere else. And maybe you know them. I have friends, and they would tell me years later, I'm still bitter that they had the nerve to leave me. Like that was some big deal. So that's just a general principle. It's not our church. We shouldn't even want a church because, that's stress. Jesus is the chief shepherd. He's the owner. He's the cornerstone. He died to purchase the church. It is his and his alone. What do I deserve? To go to hell. That's what I deserve. The fact that he saved me by his grace stuck me in, 125 people in the middle of the desert. I am the luckiest guy in the world, right? Who said that? Baseball player. That was, anyway, that's a Yankee, I'm sure. He said, I feel like I'm the luckiest guy in the world.
Oh, Lou Gehrig.
Lou Gehrig, that's right. And so here I am, and then these other churches call. Well, that's noise to me. I just got to ask the master pastor, is it time? Do you want me to change assignments?
Right.
I never felt released. I can't even explain it.
Yeah.
Cheryl still, every time we pass that facility by the water, as you describe it, she shakes her head. And I said, baby, I'm sorry, but I'm not. I would love to live at the beach.
Yeah.
Honestly, I would love to live at the beach. I love the beach. But it was not what I was given to do.
It was clear to you.
So
were
clear.
Not called
that
to
church called me, and they said, would you throw your hat in the ring? I said, no. And the guy was a little bit taken aback, and he said, would you at least pray about it? And I said, no. And he said, why won't you even pray about it? I said, I only pray about stuff I'm not sure of.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I just know.
You knew it was just
clear. Jeremy, what would happen? Even at Height as a church, we had a magical run, if you want to use the term loosely. We had a magical run for a number of years. Why? Because of me? No. It was because of the relationships God formed. It was because of Tom, Jack, George, Jeremy, Kurt, and different ones would peel off here and there and go do their thing. I look around the country now at the ministries that are being led by these guys that peeled off. I'm thankful they left. I wasn't at the time, but I could see what the master pastor had in mind when it happened. So I don't know. The disappointment. People say to me, they say, what was your greatest mistake in ministry? And I can come up with a few, more than a few. But that's a different question than what would you have done differently? Okay. Well, I wouldn't have done it differently because I was too stupid to know how to do it right the first time. Why would I do it differently? Knowing, what I knew then, I'd do the same thing now. But what God taught us during those stupid decisions that turned out to be less than optimal, the growth, having to pull this team really closer together to get through that season. Man, I wouldn't trade that for anything. The shared threat that we experienced together was special. But it was hard, but it was special. So what would I do differently? I don't know if I would do anything differently.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean we didn't do a lot of stupid stuff. But God still grew us and used it and made us better at who we were and what we did. I don't know. I can't say, Jeremy, you know my heart. I can't say enough good things about God. I just can't.
Yeah.
He's just good.
Yeah.
He's been good to us.
We talked earlier because you learn more from models than you do manuals, and the fact is you mentored me, but we didn't have a manual. You know,
Right.
you didn't tell me write this down and do this, and this is what you need to do.
Right.
But there was a very real relationship that was there that you invited me into, and I was able to ask you questions, and you were very gracious in answering those questions, and it wasn't such a intentional thing that you said, I got to mentor these guys. It was just relational. We went to lunch. I mean, all these guys.
Red Lobster.
We would go to Red Lobster, and we would go to Red Robin, and we'd eat those fries. And we would load up in a van, in that van that you had that you mentioned earlier, and we'd go have lunch, and we'd all just sit there and talk, and there was mentoring taking place naturally right there. But then, as time went on, and maybe I was there about 4 or 5 years at that point, we went to lunch about once a month. And
at your request.
Yes, and that's something about mentoring that you taught me, is the one being mentored should be asking.
Yes.
Should be asking the questions and should be asking to be mentored. And I think that's something that that was so important to me. And what was your philosophy on that? What is your philosophy on that mentoring idea?
There were, again, there were a lot of things, coulda, woulda, shoulda, maybe, done more intentionally when it comes to mentoring. So I'm not here to dismiss the value of mentoring programs. But it just wasn't me. I know your time is valuable. My time is, valuable. So if we're going to spend time together, it needs to be valuable. And we preach you can't help somebody who doesn't want to be helped. You tell your flock that. We want people to change, but if they don't want to change, there's nothing we can do.
Yeah.
Now, God can change their heart. That's above our pay grade.
Yeah.
If they want help, we can help them. That's about it. And the same idea is true, I believe, with this mentoring idea, this mentoring concept. If somebody is an associate, and it could be Jeremy McGarity as the pastor to young adults at High Desert Church, if he wants to be mentored, he'll ask me. I'm not going to ask him. And it's not because, and you know this, I wouldn't take time to, or didn't have time to. You can't mentor somebody that doesn't want to be mentored.
And that would feel obligated. If the senior pastor comes and I want to mentor you, well, what are they going to say?
You're going to say no.
Okay.
And
But their heart might not be.
Yeah, and so that was the essence of it. I had an open door policy.
Yep.
My door was never closed unless I had a meeting.
Yep. And
then it was closed. And there was always good accountability. We had windows on our doors, you know that.
Yep.
But the door was always open. People would come by, they'd say, you got 10 minutes. I always had 10 minutes. Now, they took an hour.
Yeah.
If they'd have said, do you have an hour? I'd probably said, can we plan this a little bit?
Yeah.
But I always said, 10 minutes, come on in. We ended up talking for an hour. But then we had lunch with groups or with just one-on-one or whatever. And it's just leadership is caught, not taught.
Yeah.
Just like leading a church, like leading a family. And the time with your kids is time that you don't hand them a manual. Say, okay, we're going to go over this. I mean, you might for some reason, if you're teaching them a particular skill. But generally speaking, you're just going to spend time together.
Yeah.
They're going to learn how to be a dad by watching you be theirs. They're going to learn how to be a good husband, not by reading books you recommend.
Yeah.
I mean, later in life, I know that Riley, he's probably read a few, but it's really something that you pick up just by time spent.
Amen to that, for sure. Now so you're 40 years, and now it's let's say 38 years, because that's the senior pastor role. You're in 38 years, and it's time to hand it off.
Yeah.
Talk about that for a moment, because as we've talked about before, you wrote the book called Not My Church, and that's really how you have done ministry. You have had that in mind,
Right.
and that has so influenced me and so many other pastors. Like, I always believed what you said early on, in terms of I could walk away tomorrow. It's not my church, And I've thought about that when I was there, and ever since. Even planting some would say is your own church, right? You plant this church that you pour your heart and soul into.
Yeah.
But I always felt like, if God called me to something else, okay, I'm gone. Good. It's somebody else's.
Good.
Same here at Skyline. God, you want somebody? I'm gone. Whatever you need. And so, but that was your influence on that. But then you had to actually do that, because then it was time for you to transition out of High Desert Church. So talk about that, and knowing that it was time, because from the outside perspective, outside being, I'm watching this from afar now, and I'm thinking to myself, you got a lot of gas in the tank still. Like, I've seen pastors, and I know pastors, when they're done, they hang on, and you're going, God bless you, but it was time for you to leave 10 or 15 years ago or so. And they can't leave for one reason or another. And that wasn't you. You had gas in the tank. You still do have gas in the tank. And I'm convinced you would lead a mega church right now. So why? Like, at that particular time, like, you could get a phone call, and you would, and obviously the Lord, but that's the hand that He has on you. So,
Well, thank you. You overstate many things. But I would say this: if you don't lead like it's not your church, you won't leave like it's not your church.
Golly, that's gold right there.
You can't just turn it on when it's time to go if you haven't led that way. So this is good ecclesiology. It's not your church, man. We're going to be okay. Even during COVID, you probably had a lot of your proteges and those that you mentored called you up and says, "Hey, man, what are we going to do?" It was a hard season, but my response to all of them was, "Relax, bro. It's not your church." Yeah. And this didn't catch Jesus off guard. He wasn't shocked or surprised. He's going to figure out a way, because he's really smart. He's going to figure out a way to make it work. So, here we are after all that mess, and we're still okay.
Yeah.
And a lot of churches are smaller. Oh, well.
Yeah.
I mean, HTC is significantly smaller than it was when we were at our largest numbers coming in. I never worried about hitting growth markers. Yeah. And correct me if I'm wrong, and forgive me if I forgot something. You were there for 7 years.
Yeah.
And I don't think you ever heard me walk into a meeting and say, "Hey, listen, we have to be at X by the end of the year."
Never. Yep.
Who cares
Yeah.
what X is?
Yeah.
Because the growth it's entirely up to the master pastor, how fast churches grow. Now, there might be some things, and Rick Warren said this famously, it's not what churches do to grow, it's what they have to stop doing, because it's stopping growth. Yeah. So there are times we have to take a look in the mirror and say, maybe we ought to do things differently. But, the growth, again, self-induced disappointment. You set these goals you have no business setting, because it doesn't matter. We plant, we water, but the harvest, the growth and the harvest belong to Jesus. So all that to say, it's not our church. So when I knew I was not going to leave that seat at the right time. I was going to leave too soon, because I'm not smart enough to leave at the right time. I was going to leave too soon, or I was going to stay too long. And so Cheryl and I, we talked about it, and we said, what would you prefer? stay too long or leave too soon. We both agreed, leave too soon.
Wow.
So we knew we'd have gas in the tank when we left, or we thought we would. And
Yeah.
it turned out we do.
Yeah.
And that's why we're doing something else or doing some other things. But I'm often asked now, 2 years after leaving that seat, how's retirement? And I just laugh. We're as busy as we've ever been. But we're just doing different things. But it was the right time to leave. The church was going to have to make what really prompted it. Pre-COVID, this is pre-COVID when the succession plan began to kind of fire up. We needed to make some very significant capital investment decisions. If you know anything about the Victor Valley, it's low to middle income. And there was going to be debt if we were going to be able to move forward on some initiatives. Our debt at HTC, as you know, has always been very manageable because we have ratios, we have all kinds of philosophies in place to make sure we never get over our heads. But we just knew it was going to be part of the equation. And it might take a while to pay it off. Mm. So am I going to be here for the next 10 years? Well, at 65, the answer is probably no. Well, then we need to get somebody in here who is going to be here for the next 10 years to make those decisions, because I can't make a decision somebody else has to own.
Wow. Yeah.
So that's what kind of spun up the conversation for succession when it began. Mm. And then COVID slowed down the process like it slowed down so many things. And then we got a firm, and they handed us a couple of candidates and that they decided were the two best options. And one of them happened to have been on our team prior to he left and was a lead pastor elsewhere and came back to become the new lead pastor at HTC, took my seat. And when I heard those two names, and of course I recognized the one very well, I said, man, we could have saved a ton of money if you just texted me, but we had to pay this firm, quite a chunk of money to find out that they thought it would be a good fit to have him come back. So Todd's in the seat now.
Yeah.
And he's doing an amazing job.
Yeah, he's a good one. You got a good one there for sure, and got to work with him, of course, for a number of years there when I was there, and just it felt good to me even because of the partnership I know that's there, and the team and the Oikos philosophy. Everything is very clear on that. So when I think about that transition, what you're talking about, transitioning from senior leadership into something new, because it hasn't been your identity. For so many senior leaders, it really is their identity.
Yes.
And so when that is taken away, or when it, for whatever reason, whether through retirement or quitting or firing, boy, do they just go in the tank. And I would imagine with you, it's different than that, but there's still got to be something there. It's different now. In that moment, maybe there's a little bit of bliss in the beginning, but over time, that's got to be a little bit like, wow, I got to get used to this. There's a different rhythm now. Yeah. How was that moment? I'm no longer senior pastor. Let's do that. Okay, I'm no longer senior pastor. What was that like?
It's great.
Yeah. I remember you said something about a weight being lifted.
I had no idea how much of a burden it is to lead a church.
Yeah.
And HCC was a larger church, so it was maybe a bigger burden. And I had a lot of help shouldering the burden, but still, it was huge. I woke up that first morning, would have been April the 1st, 2022, and I was reborn. It was awesome. But there was also a sense of loss. Mm-hmm. But the burden was gone, so that was cool.
Yeah, with that responsibility, that weight that a lot of people don't realize or understand. It's not a 9 to 5.
Nobody gets it.
It's with you.
Till you're in the lead seat.
Yeah.
Nobody gets it. Yeah. And so I know when we've had some of our team, they've become senior leaders. You're one of them. And when they would leave the role they had at HTC to become a lead pastor, I think I told you, I would imagine I did, I'd tell them all, it's different. Yeah. It's different when the buck stops there. Yeah. But that doesn't mean it's bad. It's just a burden.
Yeah.
It's a burden. So that was gone. I did miss the rhythms like you just described it. I had never not been paid to go to church. You know, all 40 years, 47 years, people paid me to study the Bible.
Yeah, that's amazing.
That's so I did.
Yeah.
For money? No, not for money. I did it because I love Jesus. But I didn't get paid for it. So now I'm sitting there thinking, I'm not getting paid for this. So now I got to do it because just because I love the Lord, and I do, and I did. But so much of my time in the Scripture was related to preparing to share the Word.
Yeah.
And I still tell people, if you want to learn the Bible, study it as if you have to teach it.
Yeah.
Even if you don't have a teaching assignment.
Yeah.
Just pretend in your mind that you got it. Tomorrow, you're going to have to take what you're reading today and explain it to somebody.
Yeah.
And you'll force yourself to figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I did that for so long because I knew I had to figure it out because I had to explain it to them.
Yep.
And all of a sudden, there's no them. So it's different. And so when, you've been gracious, invite me to come speak, and one of the best things, I remember talking to another pastor, a friend of ours, John, John, invited me to come guest speak at his church. And he gave me some passages. In 40 years, I had never taught through those passages. And he was almost apologetic, like, oh, I'm sorry. Now you can't just pull something out of the closet. And I said, thank you.
Yeah.
Because now I'm going to have to hit the books just like I did all those years. So whenever I am asked to speak, I appreciate it when somebody asks me to participate in a series. Because then I have to adjust what I have.
Yeah.
And it forces me to get back in the Word and all that. So that has been an adjustment.
2 years now into that change.
Yeah.
And you still have an office at High Desert Church. What is that feeling? Talk a little bit about all of that kind of. It's different. I mean, I think that's important, to really understand the difference there and what you're feeling as you go through.
Yeah, the office. They gave me an office when I left. First of all, there's no way I'm ever going to be detrimental to what Todd and the team are trying to do now.
Yeah.
So I continue to be amazed by what he does, what they do. But I am not ever going to be a roadblock in any way, shape, or form. I'm not in any meetings. Sometimes I would attend a meeting where information is shared to the staff. And Todd and Joanna have been wonderful to Cheryl and I, invited us. They still invite us to all the staff events. And we do go to many, but I'm not in any conversations about what the church should be doing. I have my opinions, and you know what? They don't matter anymore. I walked into the office for the first time, and this is weeks after I was not the lead pastor. I walked in the office for the first time, and it hit me. Nobody here cares what I think. Nobody cares what I think anymore. 2 weeks ago, everybody showed up that day. I hope I wasn't the kind of leader that they felt like I got to make Tom happy. But that's always in the back of an associate's mind at any level, director level, ministerial level, pastoral level. If they're being paid by the church, they want to make the senior pastor, to some degree happy with what they're doing. I know I did as an associate years ago. And it's not like they're people pleasers, but it's just part of the fabric of our psyche. And then I walked in, I said, nobody cares. And nobody asked. They all said hello like they always did. I would go to lunch with members of the team. I still go to lunch once a month with Todd, the new senior leader. We talk about baseball and basketball. I mean, my opinions are not important anymore.
How does that make you feel? I mean, that's natural, I get it, but it's 38 years. How does that make you feel?
My opinion, I vested heavily into a marriage
Yeah.
with my beloved. Eventually, I've told at marriage events, if you don't get divorced, eventually it's just you and her anyway.
Yeah.
So you need to invest in that because that's what you're going to end up with.
Yeah.
So it better be good.
She still listens to your opinion, right?
Cheryl, yeah. My opinion matters. My opinion matters to Cheryl. It matters to my kids. It matters to my 11 grandchildren.
Ah, amazing.
And so that's fine. But my opinion may not be a good one. Jesus' opinion about me is the one that you're always concerned about. Not your opinions, but what does he think of me?
Yeah.
Because eventually, eternity
That's what
rests.
matters.
How you're gonna, your exit strategy in this life is more important than your succession plan in a job. One of these days, we're gonna have a succession plan when I'm gonna give up this
Yeah.
and enter into something
Yeah.
that I've always believed is much better.
Yeah. So I'm going to make some assumptions because we know Oikos, Skyline Church knows Oikos, HDC people who may be watching as well know Oikos. But there's maybe a pastor or a congregant or someone who's a Christian anyone that's just wondering, what are you guys talking about when this Oikos philosophy?
Yeah.
Maybe you can just in a nutshell give that to us.
A lot of people think it's yogurt.
Yeah, I hear that a lot. Yep.
But it's a Greek word. Oikos is a Greek word, which is why the yogurt people picked it up.
Yep.
And it means extended household or extended family. It's those 8 to 15 people who live closest to you in some capacity, whether at work or at school or in the neighborhood or maybe biological relationships. But they're the 8 to 15 people God has supernaturally and strategically placed in, as we say, the front row seats of your life. So you got a theater and you're on the stage and everybody you interact with at any level is filling that auditorium, that theater. Some people you don't see very much and they're sitting at a distance. Others a little closer, some closer still, maybe even as close as the orchestra pit. But then there are those 8 to 15 seats we call the front row. They're the ones who can hear you the most clearly and see you the most clearly because they're close. And they have the opportunity to hear you and to hear what is important to you and to watch how you live your life. Statistically, 95% of the people who become Christians, who gave their hearts to Christ, actually gave their hearts to Christ because of the influence of someone in their front row, someone in their oikos. And if you question that metric, 95% is a shutdown metric in a conversation, a statistical conversation. 95% in the world of statistics is essentially 100%. You would use terms like everybody. Now, it's not true that it's everybody, but it's pretty close. And that's why I ask pastors, if you're wondering if I'm right or wrong, just ask the church that you lead right now. Explain what the oikos idea is, the extended household. The Greeks use that word, but what it means today. And then just ask your congregation, raise your hand if you'd say that the primary reason you're a Christian is because of the influence of one of those people. Everybody in the room will raise their hand. I use, this, I use the term in the books I've written, and our training's 95%, the term, the number, the metric. I use 95%. I think it's closer to 99 personally, but so many people already think I'm crazy. I just keep it at 95, and then, that's enough. But it's massive. It is a massive piece of data that the church has ignored for too long. And that's why we do what we do, to help pastors see, you realize that there's a piece of data that you're missing.
Yeah.
Because it isn't so much that share Jesus with your friends and family. I mean, nothing new there. Invite your neighbor. Everybody has been preaching that for as long as I can remember. But the way you lead a church and structure a church will determine whether or not people will actually do what you challenge them to do in inviting their friends and family to know Jesus. A lot of people will hear that, but they won't respond because the ministries we lead aren't structured to support that idea. So that's what we talk to a lot of pastors about, is just how to structure a church that actually supports the Great Commission. You need to align your ministry with the Great Commission, just like we as individual believers are called to align our lives to the Great Commission, since it's the only thing Jesus gave us to do.
And you talk about that very, very clearly in your books. And if someone wanted to get one of your books, how can they do that?
Well, you can just go to oikosmovement.com, and you can order whatever you want there. We have a few books. We have a YouTube page.
Yeah.
You can just put that into your
Oikos Movement on YouTube.
Oikos Movement on YouTube, and there will be a lot of messages, trainings from different pastors around the country who we have had the chance to influence or be a part of their ministry to some degree. And you can hear from them and find out what it's all about.
Now you have trainings too, right? That they can download. They
Got
can
workshops.
Go on workshops
they
and
can.
take a look and see how to implement this in their church. And I think one of the most important things, you mentioned it, you've been mentioning it for years, is so many pastors are looking for the next thing.
Yeah.
Hey, this program. Oh, this is the program we're going to do now. Oh, I liked what he was saying. I'm going to do an Oikos program. Yeah. But it's not.
No.
I mean, it's either everything or it's nothing.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, so kind of share a little bit about that. Yeah. Like you've said that for years.
Yeah. Jesus gave us one thing to do between his advents. Just one. Yeah. We call it the Great Commission. But then he gave us a strategy. Historically, the strategy has been consistent. When you read, whether it's biblical scholars or just historians, how the Christian church grew so prolifically for hundreds of years post-Jesus, they will all tell you it was because of the Oikos principle. And then we have the Western church today that's in decline because we have depended so much on the stage. Where around the world, Jeremy, and you know this, the gospel is growing faster in countries where you can't have a weekend service, you can't have a church building, and you can't have a public paid clergyman.
Yeah, that's incredible.
You can't. Not to say those three things are wrong to have.
Yeah.
Because you and I both were or are in leadership as paid clergy. We have our meetings in church buildings on Sundays. Most of the world doesn't have that opportunity, yet the church is growing more quickly there.
Yeah.
And so we believe it's because all they have is, well, they got the Bible, they have the Holy Spirit, yeah, I can't forget that, but then they implement the Oikos principle because they have nothing else.
Yeah.
And man, it works. It works
incredible.
well.
That's incredible. Well, Tom, thank you for taking time with us on Faith and Culture. And, when I look at the victories, when I look at the salvations here, when I look at the baptisms, and, it's been a tremendous thing to see what God is doing. And it's an extension of your ministry. It's an extension of what God did in you and is continuing to do in you. And that's what I love about the kingdom. Like you said, God just, okay, we're over here now. But what you taught and what was caught from everything up there is continuing. It continues in San Diego and Tennessee and Kansas City and Arizona and all of our online folks that watch. So I cannot thank you enough, and I appreciate you. I love you, and God bless you.
Love you too, brother. And I'm proud of you, boy.
Thank you.
Keep up the good work.
Amen. And for our 14 million subscribers, we appreciate all of you. Maybe it was 14. But anyhow, thank you guys for watching Faith and Culture or listening to it. And I hope you were able to grab something from this time together. And just let us know in the comments. If you have questions, of course, visit oikosmovement.com. And you can always email Tom as well and get his information. Any kind of curriculum you need, any kind of training, man, here for you. God bless you guys. See you next time.